Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Scottish Developers October Meetup. Now, tonight's talk is going to be a really interesting one. We've got a speaker from one of the great technology companies in the city, Deliveroo, and he'll be speaking about Next.js. Now, I did say we had some sound issues, so I'm just going to fix that. It seems like they've cropped up again. We'll get this show on the road very, very shortly. That should be us all good. And without further ado, I shall bring in the man himself, Alex Bardas, to speak to you about Next.js in the real world. Hi, Alex.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone.
Hey. So without further ado, I am just going to let you introduce yourself to our good folks and get the show on the road about our talk about Next.js and refactoring at scale.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay. Is my presentation working okay? Cool. I'll take this as a yes. Well, hello everyone. My name is Alex Bardas. I'm currently working as a senior backend engineer at Deliveroo, and I'm delighted to have the chance to deliver this presentation about Next.js in the real world refactoring at scale. When I agreed to do it over 6 months ago, I was working for a different company where we just finished delivering Happy.js to Next.js migration into production. I hope that those considering migrating their existing stack to Next.js or those looking to use Next.js for their next project are going to find this presentation very useful. I'm going to start by providing some context about where we were when we started this migration, what technology were we using, and also what was the scale, the size of our application, how many lines of code, endpoints, and so on we had in the application. Next, I'll carry on discussing more about Next and the migration process. And I guess that especially the process itself is going to be found relevant also for those working in a corporate environment, because obviously it's not always easy to just go and update the technology stack or applications that are used in production by lots of customers. I will present what we enjoyed, what we disliked, and even what we hated about Next.js. And I finished with some learnings related to this migration. First of all, the existing web application was a banking online portal allowing customers to manage their products, credit cards, and personal details. It was split into 3 microservices, and it was using React Redux on the client side and Happy.js on the server side. It was all deployed into AWS, into cloud, but this is not really relevant for this topic today. All of the information provided also is publicly available, but I'm going to present some numbers so you can better understand the size of the. So, in total, those services had about 500,000 lines of code. And this is obviously, this code doesn't include external libraries, and it also the 500,000 lines of code consists both of client-side and server-side code. In total, this web services were used by more than 500,000 customers every month. And this can give a rough estimation of the importance of these particular services for the customers. They consist of 30 API endpoints and 15 endpoints serving HTML pages. The application was also using client-side routing. So in total, there were more than 15 client-side URLs. But those 15 endpoints were actually rendered on the server. So I guess based on everyone's experience, like some people might listen this and consider this being a medium to large application, others consider this maybe a large application, or some maybe a medium application. The thing is that obviously those projects were started many years ago, and some of the technology choices were already less relevant to
Hi, Alex. I think we're getting reports that there's the weird feedback issue again. I don't suppose you could do whatever magic trick you did last time to kick it back into shape.
So what I try to do is close and start it again.
I think Jamie in the audience has said the second tab is the stream playing back to itself.
Okay.
Recursive audio.
Is it better now?
Try again. Thanks, folks, for bearing with us. Nothing like a live audio stream. Try again, Alex.
So can maybe show me a thumbs up because I'm going to mute this tab and I'm not going to hear anything from you. So is it better now? Can you hear me?
No.
Can't hear me. Okay.
I think he's actually got headphones in, Joe. Yeah, we all do like a million Zoom calls a week, but when it's live, it always seems to.
If I stop sharing this, give me a second. I'm just going to join again. This did last time. I'm going to see if this is going to improve anything now.
Thanks everyone for your patience. I can appreciate this isn't going as smoothly as possible, but Alex will be right back. Yeah, it could be worse. We could be doing a live coding demo, Ewan.
Okay.
That sounds.
Is it better?
Here.
Yes. Don't know what's happening. Is it maybe when I shared the screen? Let me try to share it again.
I think it might be StreamYard and your shared browser being the same thing.
Okay, let me try to share a different tab window then.
Well, you're getting lots of shows of support anyway.
Cool. So is this any better?
Just adding it to the stream now.
Okay.
Can people start giving a thumbs up if they can hear Alex okay?
Hi again. Is this any better? Cool. Looks good. Non-robot Alex. Sounds good. So let's try now. Oh, cool. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. And let's carry on. So just going to quickly go through the previous slide. So there were it was a banking application split into 3 microservices, and it had around 500,000 lines of code. So depending on everyone's experience, this can be seen as a medium to large application. But the fact that it was actually split into 3 different services proved to be very useful going forward. So there were a few problems with the existing web application. There were lots of boilerplate and duplicated code, especially on the server side, related to the HTML rendering of the pages. There were also some small differences between production and non-production builds. On the client side, we were using Create React App, and that was using the Webpack Dev server, which was not used in production. And there were a few small differences, and pretty much every time before going into prod, you had to do another production build locally, just to make sure that what you have been using in development so far was relevant to production as well. It was also
Alex.
Yes.
When you shared your screen, I believe when you tried to go to full size, the screen has frozen.
Okay.
I think everything was fine, I think, folks, until he went to full screen.
Can you see my screen now? Or is it still frozen?
I think your screen's now disappeared.
Yes, I will try to share again. So many different issues. Let me know if it is going to be better. If it's better, can you see it?
So I can now see your screen perfectly. The feedback issue seems to have come back.
Oh, with the sound.
Yeah, this is. I think it's to set context. I think the software that we're using, I'm assuming, doesn't play well with single screen. I would assume, rather than anything with your computer. Try again.
Can you hear me any better now?
No, it's going a bit funny. This is live debugging at its finest. Or what did you do last time? I take it you just kind of came in and were.
So I just opened the browser and restarted it. I can try Google Chrome as well with Firefox. So this is normally my day-to-day setup, which works okay with other tools.
Yeah, I know. I can't imagine you survive without Zoom and Teams and things like that.
Also, let me stop, and I can maybe try to use Google Chrome and see if this is going to be any better.
Sure, no problem. And again, thanks folks for participating in this live video streaming debugging session. Hi, Alex.
Okay. Is
That
it better
sounds
now?
It sounds better now. So
Okay. Let me try to share and let's see how this will work.
yeah,
Oh, can you see my screen?
I can now.
Okay.
It's
Can
just
you
gone
see
off.
it in full screen now?
No, it's just disappeared. The only thing I can think of, I'm not sure. So everyone says they're with you to the end. The only thing I can think of is I don't know what folks think. It seems fine when he doesn't go full screen. I'm not sure how large the slides are when they're not full screen.
Oh, I can try maybe to zoom in a bit. Like they don't have to go full screen. So I guess I have to share it again. And I'll just keep it as it is. But how is the audio? How is the sound?
The audio at the moment is good.
Okay. Let's see for how long, and let's carry on. Cool. So thanks for going through this with me. Sorry for any issues. I don't know exactly what is happening. This is also an application I haven't used before. I thought it was going to be similar to the usual suspects, but there seems to be some technical difficulties with it. But please let me know if there are going to be any more issues. Now I've switched. I've opened the streaming in Google Chrome. Cool. Let's go back to the slides. So problems with the existing web application. So I've already mentioned a few. Don't know what was the quality, but pretty much the existing framework was not used outside the organization. There were some differences between production and non-production builds, and there were lots of duplicated code on the server side related to rendering the HTML pages. But the most important one, which actually triggered sorry, I was just checking the comments to make sure that it is still okay, which I think it is, which triggered us to start to look into new alternatives was when the happy maintainer announced that the framework was going to be discontinued as an free open source project, and they were only planning to offer commercial license to it in order to deliver security and the new updates. And this was pretty much the time when we started to take it very seriously. And when we actually started we started to put on the table the alternatives, and we started discussing them and involving other parts of the business as well. First, what is Next.js? So it is a full stack React framework for developing single-page JavaScript applications. It has server-side rendering as well, and it provides a cohesive client-server-side experience with a really small API footprint. There were two things that I wanted to highlight. So it has two types of endpoints, pages and APIs. So pages are you can think of them as the index.htmls. So those are the HTML server-side render content, and APIs, which are usually what you'd use for JSON APIs, JSON responses, for example. And it also has two different ways to run. So it can run inside the custom server, which is a very convenient experience, especially when you are migrating from something else to Next. You can use exactly what you have, and you can slowly start to roll out only some of the features from Next.js that you need. This is exactly what we did. But it can also run as a standalone server. So for example, this is a more convenient way to run it for new applications. Just quickly going back into the comments. So it looks like everything is good now. Thank you very much. Just let me know in case there is any other problem. And as soon as we got the news from Happy, eventually there was a small community that decided to keep Happy as an open source project and to try to deliver security updates, for example, to Happy. But this came out a few weeks later, and we already started looking at the alternatives. So what was very important to involve the stakeholders very soon and to pretty much to mention to them why we actually have to consider this as an important piece of work to start to migrate to a new framework, how it is going to take, and also trying to make sure that no other feature work that was already, for example, accepted that that we are going to do was going to be impacted by this framework migration. We started to investigate other frameworks. So we looked at Express, we looked at Next. There were also a few other alternatives that we looked into, and we did a spike to understand the developer engagement. So this was a separate ticket that came into our sprint. We wanted to allocate enough time, a few days on this, to make sure that we can we are going to have something solid that we can discuss between us, between the developers, and come to a conclusion based on this. We also were interested to identify possible bottlenecks, limitations, and given that we actually had 3 different applications, we wanted just to try to migrate each service one at a time. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this later on. So what was the spike? So the first spike was just a proof of concept Next.js like application, let's say random application. It was not related to what we were doing, just to demonstrate the structured development and how we are able to test the Next.js application. After seeing that Next was actually ticking lots of the checkboxes that we had, we decided to see how long it would actually take if we would just be able to quickly port one of our services. So we knew that we had a problem with the client side and the server side code. We had 2 different versions, a production and a development version. There were some subtle differences, and our assumption was that because Next is a React framework, even if it is doing some server-side rendering, it should be possible to use it, to use the existing client-side code and just see how long migrating our existing application, pretty much keeping the server side exactly as it was, but migrating the client side using Next. Migrating the client side to Next without any tests, without any, without trying to make it perfect. We just wanted to see, is it possible to pretty much, we had the previous application, we were building it and we were able to go to a landing page. How much effort would it be to do this, but with Next? To have Next serving that HTML page, integrated into the existing framework through a custom server, how much effort would that be? And we were quite surprised to see that in less than 4 hours, we were able to actually migrate the client side, the CSS. There were a few changes that we had to do, but we were successfully able to integrate Next as Happy.js plugin to render those routes. So those routes were not longer rendered by Happy; they were rendered by Next. And then Next was using all of the existing client-side code to render those pages, and everything seemed to work fine. So this gave us quite a lot of confidence that at least on the client side, it is possible to do this um, without having to rewrite too much. And we are convinced that there was going to be a lot more effort on the server side, especially if we were willing to drop Happy and move as pretty much all of the other endpoints, the APIs, the middlewares, everything that we are using from Happy to Next. Cool. So what we did next was we then presented the migrated application to the rest of the team. And we didn't want to rush into going and quickly starting to do more work. We just wanted to give enough time for everyone to question our approach, decisions, to understand what is working, maybe what problems they were able to foresee, and we agreed on the best way forward. And I guess the key learning here probably was involve the team, because we already know that there was quite a lot of motivation for us to move to something else, to Next.js. But there are obviously also some developers that have been using Happy for the last few years, and like for them, Next was something slightly different. Was using some different conventions, and we just wanted to make sure that were going to be on board. They were going to be on the same page with everyone else. So we then looked at what would be the best way to split the applications and services to deliver this migration incrementally. So we switched the client-side application one by one, and the server-side application as well, one by one. But first, we just decided let's just switch all of the client side in all of the services, because there was going to be less work. We already know that we don't have to make many changes to migrate the client side. And then because we had different services, we were able to understand what were the right services for us to start doing the work. So if we're, for example, if we're doing some feature work in other services, because we didn't want to have too many conflicts, we didn't really want to spend too much time doing rebases, merges, and so on. We just started working on the services which were not going, for example, to be touched in the next sprint. This also involved a bit of coordination, developer coordination, but it was quite straightforward, and it allowed us in just a number of probably of a few weeks to port all of the client-side applications. And on the server side, there was a bit more work initially because we were using lots of Happy.js plugins or middlewares, how they are called in other frameworks. And we also had to make some changes there in order to integrate them with Next. But the important thing here was that as we agree with the stakeholders, everything that was an important feature that had to be developed and deployed in the meantime had priority, and this migration didn't really interfere with any other work. Cool. So in total, I would probably say it took maybe a few months. We didn't rush. We switched the first client application. We delivered it into production. We switched the second one, the third one. Then on the server side, there was a bit more work. And along with this migration, we have also delivered quite a lot of other work. But at the end, it was something that we all agree that was very useful. We pretty much managed to get rid of any Happy dependency, And there is a full ecosystem there. They have lots of other libraries that integrate very well with Happy, and we are able to move away from all of those. The experience was very good. The developer experience was as well very good. And I'm going to dive into some of the things that we enjoyed, some of the things that we disliked, and some of the things that we thought that there were huge areas of improvement for Next.js. So the good, there are almost no changes to the client side, given that there is some server-side rendering. We had to make sure that whenever the keyword window, for example, was used, and this was not in too many places, we had to, for example, to have an if else. If it is on the server, then don't execute that code. Otherwise, it is possible to execute it. This was like something really important because if you have, I'd probably say if you have just a backend project, right, you just have APIs, then probably Next is overkill. It can do that, but it is doing a lot more. Like overall, the development experience is very good, but it is probably doing a lot more than you'd need. But if you have a React application, and maybe you're using Create React app and you have some backend and you'd want a more cohesive experience, then Next is definitely a very interesting solution to explore. It has a small API footprint. We noticed that it doesn't require any expert level to be productive in. It's very quickly to go through the docs, and new developers being able to come and work on the code base were able to deliver work quicker than before with Happy. It has lots of useful conventions. It is, for example, using the file system for routing. It is splitting the pages and APIs into its own files and folders. And it is possible to pretty much go on a new Next.js project and very easily kind of understand the structure of the project. What are the endpoints? How many APIs do you have? What are the APIs? Rather than on a good old, for example, Express project where you'd have to find the files. There would probably be some team-specific conventions where those files with the roots, with the endpoints are, and in many cases they are split even into multiple files. So Next is definitely making this a very good, very pleasant experience. It helped us to reduce the server-side code boilerplate that had to deal with rendering index.html pages. Again, the cohesiveness between client side and server side rendering is very good, and it is not like we had to be very careful because like what is the limit there, right? You have, for example, lots of state, lots of variables, maybe even secrets on the server side. Are they going to be exposed on the client side? Are they going to be like, how are they going to be handled? And like everything is like it's quite smart. Like you have to like be very specific if you want to share like an environment variable, for example, that you have on the server. If you want that one to be available on the client as well. So I would probably say it has all of the right defaults, but obviously it's always best to double check at the end just to make sure that this convenience isn't going to cause any problems. We noticed that the compatibility with the previous version of the web application that was using Happy was 100%. We maybe had some doubts about some page transitions that we had done purely on the client side, while with Next, which comes with its own routing as well, it is involving some server side calls as well, requests, and we were able to see that actually there was no problem whatsoever. Everything was pretty much the same. Given that we had server side rendering, actually everything felt a bit more faster because we were able to very quickly render the header, the footer, and maybe have a spinner in the middle rather than show a blank page until all of the code was loaded. All of the JavaScript and CSS was loaded first on the page. So the overall experience was not only for the developers, but also for the customers was better. And again, another important thing is that it is a very relevant technology for 2021. It is going to stay relevant. There is pretty much a company built around it, Versal, and they are investing lots of resources. They have even conferences about it where they discuss new features, and the community is very vibrant. They take a lot of the feedback and they sometimes discuss it a lot. I'm going to touch a bit later on some of the ugly aspects, but those are actually aspects that they are looking into. And like overall, it was a very enjoyable experience. If we go into some of the things that were not as great as we wanted them to be, those would be probably the lack of a middleware or plugin support. It is probably going to come soon, but also Next is there for already 3, 4, 5 years, and they, except of a paper, which was pretty much a GitHub issue where they added lots of comments and they discussed it a lot. There was no support for a middleware or a plugin system. So we kind of had to come up with our own. So we didn't start from scratch. There were a few attempts on the web, and we had to slightly customize them for our needs. And eventually, we come up with a middleware plugin, which is very, very similar to Express. So for example, our middlewares could have worked also in an Express code base. And those middlewares include security, include CSRF protection. There are all sorts of use cases for them. There was a bit of inconvenience with how the Redux store had to be used between different pages. So because we wanted to keep the client-side application how it was before to reduce the number of changes we were going to make, we had to make some small adjustment on how the Redux store was being reused between the pages. So probably the hack was around 5 or 10 lines of code, but we felt that there was maybe a lack of maybe documentation, or we weren't able to find a great way in how to handle this maybe a bit better. One thing that we really wanted to do was to try to use Next as a standalone server. So I mentioned at the beginning that, for example, if you're starting a new project, you'd probably use Next as a standalone server. So you don't have any Express server or Node HTTP, you just use Next. But because of the fact that we weren't able to reproduce some of the previous functionality that we had on the Happy server, which was required for login purposes, we had eventually to introduce a custom server. So that was just a standard Node HTTP. It probably had like around eventually 30, 40 lines of code. So not too much, but it was something that we had to introduce once for login purposes, and second, to be able to reuse some code between pages and APIs. And another thing that, like, for some people was a bit maybe unintuitive, they didn't like it very much, was the fact that it lazily builds the bundle for pages while in dev mode. So for example, let's say you go to a landing page, and then from that landing page you want to navigate to another page. So when you click on the button and you're only in development mode, then because the other page hasn't been rendered before, if it's the first time that it renders it, it needs to build it, so it can maybe take a few seconds. And for example, sometimes if you're doing a demo, like let's say to a product owner, and you're just, okay, let me start the project, let me open the page. Let me try to go there to show you something, and there is this slowness. And that person might say, is this actually an issue? Is this something that we have in production? And like there are obviously some advantages and disadvantages, but like for some people it wasn't a problem, but there were some devs which actually noticed this and didn't like the fact that it was lazily building the bundles. Now I'm going to mention some of the aspects that we didn't like at all, that we find really the community, the amount of resources that we found around them was really, really bad. So one of them was testing. What it is important to mention here is that every API or page has its own Webpack bundle, and everything runs in its own closure. So it is not really possible to share modules between between different APIs or between different pages. So between and this can be a problem, especially if you have a use case for a singleton. For example, if you have a connection pool to a database, and you really want to have one per application, and you might want to have different to establish different connections, but you really want one connection pool. And the problem with how Next works by default is that every API, every page will create its own connection pool. So eventually the custom server helped us to reuse functionality, to reuse singleton objects between APIs and pages. I guess in many cases it kind of makes sense. You keep the different modules isolated, but in case you have a cache, you might want to reuse something. It is a bit more trickier to do that. And also the testing was quite difficult, also because of the fact that everything was its own Webpack bundle. So how are you actually going to mock something if that is rendered somewhere in it is in a Webpack? You can't really have access to it anymore. And we did manage to find a way by mocking some Next.js native module that was deciding either to use it from Webpack or to import it directly, but it kind of felt hacky. And unfortunately, we did spend quite a lot of time. And back then, and this was probably end of 2020, we weren't able to find too many good resources on how to test Next.js applications. They didn't have even much on their documentation. Maybe just like some really basic examples. Right now, I'm aware of the fact that there are some solutions out there. There are some APIs that Next has, and there are some community projects that try to use them in order to improve this a lot. But it was some of the feedback that the Next team had to work on and improve upon it. Cool. So going forward, what are some of the main learnings from this? Our impression was that the team loved working in Next.js. It provides a great development experience. It has all of the good parts from Create React App and Webpack Dev Server and everything. They've even hired the Webpack creator and maintainer at Versal, the company who is behind Next.js. The motivation to use better tools and more relevant frameworks was definitely a key factor. And I can say that the motivation was there. Like everyone was really, really wanted to be able to develop in a framework that offered a better experience as sooner as possible. I would probably say that like everything went really smoothly. The development, there was there was a lot of interest for everyone to try to finish with this as sooner as possible. So we were able to just use something that was a better fit for purpose. There was indeed some problems because Next is using server-side rendering and some client-side libraries caused some issues. So one of those was React Helmet, which is a library that allows you to inject, for example, scripts or meta tags or titles. So it allows you to add elements, HTML elements in the head part of the HTML. And internally, it had, because it was always expecting to work on the client side. And on the client side, what happens? You at some point you refresh the page or you kill the tab, you open a new tab. It was constantly adding some state into a list, and then it was iterating to that list. And we were able to see that at scale on the server side, after hundreds of thousands of requests, there was a CPU problem, and there was potentially a memory leak caused by this library. So eventually, we were able to fix it quickly. We were able to remove it, but just something to be aware of, because there are some subtle differences, and some things are actually different when using server-side rendering rather than rendering everything on the client side. Again, the community was great. We were able to ask questions to get really quick answers. They have, I think, a Discuss or a Slack channel as well, and that was it was very active. So it kind of breeds activity, and this is great when you are working on something and you want. It really helps if that thing is relevant, is active, is maintained, and if they can address things in just a few days and create patches based on community feedback in just a few days as well. And if anything, projects are more likely to fail because of people rather than the technology. Involving the team was, I think, was something really important. Everyone understanding the benefits, understanding the trade-offs, but eventually being able to explore the full power of Next.js. Cool. Sorry again for all of the issues that we had at the beginning. And I hope that the second part, the last part of the presentation worked much better. And
got there in the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was going to open up the floor to some questions. I can see we've got a couple already. So Louis said, did you have any issues with testing when running in CI or build?
Sure. So not exactly. So I would probably say the problems were with writing the tests. So just for the integration test, those were okay. Were similar to other frameworks where you just test the functionality on top of an existing running server. But for unit testing, the problem was more in the development stage rather than the CI stage. As soon as we got into CI, everything worked okay.
And Michael wants to know, would you say Next is a little more complex than the likes of Express and Happy?
So definitely more complex than Express because it also deals with the client-side rendering, server-side rendering, and it is expecting a React front end, and it is handling all of that, bundling everything for you, and so on. In terms of Happy, I would probably say Next.js is simpler on the server side than Happy. So it actually works very well if you just have a bunch of APIs and you can very easily define them, and they can be accessible via the file system. Now, again, it has some added complexity because it is supposed to work to be a solution for single-page applications and provide a cohesive experience between client and server. So Happy.js, for example, doesn't handle at all the client-side part. It's pretty much bring your own solution, which can be create React app, can be maybe Parcel.js. There are a number of different options there. But I would definitely say if you're really into full stack client and server application, so if you're doing both the client side and the server side, Next.js would be a better solution than both Express and Happy. And also, if you're using React, if you want to use something else like Vue.js, there is another alternative called Next that handles that. But for React client-side, server-side development, Next.js is a very solid solution.
Next, we have Jamie saying, what do you think the trade-off Next.js makes between exposing a powerful framework and abstracting too much away from the developer?
Also, that's a great question, Jamie. So there are always going to be some downsides to this, but from many years of web development and other frameworks like Rails and Django and convention over configuration and so on, and even what new Webpack versions, for example, what they try to achieve with convention over configuration, is that like for 90%, 95% maybe of the customers of that framework, they don't really care about too many internals. They just want things to work. Like think about you're just maybe doing a hackathon project in a weekend, or you're just starting something and you want it to work really quickly. And if this can scale also as the application grows and grows, this is much, much better. But there are always going to be those use cases, maybe 5%, where someone really needs something which is quite unique, it really needs to go and configure more. And there is always going to be maybe quite hard to find that balance. But Next is providing hooks into being able to configure how Webpack works. For example, there is a next.config.js, and it actually tries to allow you to go and configure stuff if you need them. It doesn't really want to stop, but obviously sometimes like how they expect you to go and configure stuff might not be exactly how you want or what you need. So there is always going to be maybe a small percentage of use cases where you might just have to go maybe slightly deeper into the framework's internals and figure it out yourself how you can achieve what you want. But I would definitely say that for most people and for most use cases, having everything pre-configured is very, very nice. Very nice and works very well.
Now we got Keith saying, any issues using file-based routing system?
I would probably say if you are unfamiliar with this, it might maybe feel a bit strange initially. Now you might think about maybe some security issues and so on, but actually this is all handled by the framework. And we haven't really seen anything. So you are able to use wildcards, you are able to use subdirectories. You can have dynamic, you can have query string parameters, you can have dynamic parts in the URL, and everything seemed to work very well. And one of the main advantages was that you can just, let's say in Visual Studio Code, whatever your editor of choice is, you can easily expand the folder and you see exactly what APIs, what pages you have, what endpoints you have. And it helps, I think it helps a lot more when a new joiner comes to a project, and they have a full overview of what are the endpoints that that project consists of. And I can't really name any downside right now. Seems to work very well. And I'm very happy that they decided to do it this way.
Cool. Well, I think that's the end of all the questions. So again, thanks for joining us this evening, Alex. You're a very brave and unflappable individual, given the number of issues we were able, with the help of the audience, I must say, to debug. So thanks for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us this evening.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening to me and for having the patience to go through a few restarts. But luckily enough, we found the right combination of browsers, of full screen, not full screen, that allowed us to carry on the presentation.
Reminds me of front-end development. So just before we go, I just thought I'd say a few words. We'll be sending out a survey just to get people's thoughts. We'll send that out on Meetup and Twitter. Obviously, if you yourself want to speak at a future Meetup, please do reach out on the Meetup group. And if you do have any exciting Scottish tech news, please do let us know. But anyway, thanks very much, folks, for joining us this evening, and I'll bid you all farewell till next time. Take care, everyone.